sponsored by Anchor. You know, I didn't really know what to do with podcasts or how to make one until I came across Anchor a couple weeks ago, and they're great with sponsorships, listener support. You can add music, background music, and little spliffs, little sound variations, and everything. Record from your laptop, computer, or cell phone. Their apps are great. I really enjoy Anchor. Is the best choice in podcasts. Right now, as I see, I've actually tried two other podcasts, which we'll name nameless, but Anchor is great. They dump directly into Spotify if you so choose, and you can share from there onto your other social media. Anchor. All right, fucking live. March 20th, 2021. It's Ostera, or the spring equinox today. And Ostera lasts until the 23rd, or actually could last until the 4th, until Easter. But today, we're gonna go over CV19. I think you know what that is. And I've got permission from Enter the Stars to use his broadcast from this morning on YouTube. Just the audio. And then I will be restreaming this podcast with links that he used.
Why do you have to crawl off into a hole, or go to a Zen monastery, or retire and be quiet, when this is only a withdrawal? Is there anything to be said for it? Meditation is, in that sense, as a practice, as a discipline, is a very curious problem. Because from one point of view it's a help, and from another point of view a hindrance. And I think we have to understand, first of all, that meditation exercises are medicinal rather than dietary. The same could be said of LSD. A medicinal diet. Something that is described in Zen as when you want to open the door. Someone opens the door for you, you pick up a brick, you knock on the door, but you don't carry the brick to the house. When you need a raft for crossing a stream, you cross the stream on the raft, but you leave the raft on the bank on the other side, and you're carrying it around. You're carrying it around. What is then the point of meditation? Why meditate? Why do you have to crawl off into a hole? Or go to a Zen monastery? Or retire and be quiet? Well, this is only a withdrawal. Is there anything to be said for this? One day Confucius was out for a walk with his disciples, and he saw an old man fall into a big mountain stream and thought, alas, he is sick and old and tired of life, and he's making off with himself. For below where the point where he fell in, there was an enormous cataract, and then rocks and rapids underneath. But suddenly, the old man appeared way down below the rapids. He crawled out of the stream and went strolling along the banks. Confucius was amazed, and he immediately sent a disciple to run after the old man so that he could talk to him. He said, "Sir, I thought you were about to make away with yourself, but I see now that you must be a spirit." And he said, "No, I'm not a spirit, I'm just a perfectly human being." "Well, then how did you survive the cataract?" He said, "In no special way. I just went in with the swirl and came out with the whirl. I did nothing. I simply adapted myself to the nature of the water." And so in the same way, we have it connected with the Taoist and early Zen traditions, many instances of famous monks who were quite mad. On the Esalen announcement for this series of workshops and seminars, there is a drawing of Han Shan. And he and his companion, Shota, or the Japanese say Hanzan and Jitoku, they were two mountain hermits who are favorite subjects of Zen artists because they are shown wandering about together in the woods, laughing at falling leaves. And the Sengai used to like to draw them with the sutras open, chanting away with their hair all frazzled and laughing, chanting the sutras. And really not paying any attention to what they mean at all, but just having a ball, making these noises. But as a matter of fact, Han Shan was an extraordinarily competent poet, in perfect control of the language when he needed to be. But all that controlled mastery was somehow based on the attitude of what we will call fundamental nonsense. Fundamental goofing off because you really don't need to make life work. The point is, you see, these two ways of being are not incompatible. They appear to be incompatible when you think that the foundation of everything is the tough discipline. Now that's basic. It is not basic. It's secondary, and it's an important secondary. But you can't really make it work unless you build it on top of the primary, which is the goofing off attitude of the child. To learn an excellent discipline and to learn it well, you've got to goof your way into it. In other words, you have to learn, say in drawing, how to make very fine lines by getting absorbed in doodling them. See? Do it not because there's anything special to be accomplished, but just because it's such a gas to make the brush go in a certain way like that. When you practice calligraphy, for example, Western calligraphy or Chinese calligraphy, you begin to dig the amazing shapes that a brush can make. And you play with your hands, just go so. You're not trying to please anybody, the master, or make an impression. You're just digging that brush. The Chinese are very clever about this because they make writing such a delight. For example, they perfume the ink, and it has very subtle perfume, which is extremely great. And then they rub the ink on a stone in water, and it makes a beautiful blue-black mixture. And the feeling of sliding this stick back and forth on the inkstone is just as groovy as could be. Now, existence, you see, is something that is spontaneous. The Chinese word for nature, zhiran, means that which happens of itself. Your hair grows by itself. Your heart beats by itself. You breathe pretty much by itself. Your glands secrete their essences by themselves. You don't have voluntary control over these things. So we say it happens spontaneously. So when you go to sleep and you try to go to sleep, you interfere with the spontaneous process of going to sleep. Try to breathe, real hard, and you find you get balled up in your breathing. So, if you're going to be human, you just have to trust yourself to have bowel movements and go to sleep and digest your food. Of course, if something goes seriously wrong and you need a surgeon, that's another matter. But by and large, the healthy human being doesn't, right from the start of life, need surgical interference. And he lets it happen by itself. So the whole picture, that is fundamental. You've got to let go and let it happen. Because if you don't, you're going to be all clutched up. You're going to be constantly trying to do what can happen healthily only if you don't try. But we have a strange anxiety in us that if we don't interfere, it won't happen. Now that's the root of an enormous amount of trouble. But the basis of it all is this, then. If we say, you must survive, or I must survive, life is earnest, and I've got to go on, then your life is a drag, and not a game. Now, it's my contention, my personal opinion, this is my basic metaphysical axiom, shall we put it that way, that existence, the physical universe, is basically playful. There is no necessity for it whatsoever. It isn't going anywhere. That is to say, it doesn't have some destination that it ought to arrive at. So then, in music, though, one doesn't make the end of a composition the point of the composition. If that was so, the best conductors would be those who played fastest. And there would be composers who wrote only finales. People go to a concert just to hear one crashing chord, because that's the end. Same way in dancing. You don't aim at a particular spot in the room. That's where you should arrive. The whole point of the dancing is the dance. Now, but we don't see that as something brought by our education into our everyday conduct. We've got a system of schooling which gives a completely different impression. It's all graded. And what we do is we put the child into the corridor of this grade system with a kind of, come on, kitty, kitty, kitty. And you go to kindergarten, and that's a great thing because when you finish that, you'll get into first grade. And then come on, first grade leads to second grade and so on, and then you get out of grade school, you go to high school, and it's revving up, the thing is coming. Then you're going to go to college, and by Jove, then you get into graduate school, and when you're through with graduate school, you go out to join the world. And then you get into some racket where you're selling insurance, and they've got that quota to make, and you're going to make that, and all the time, this thing is coming. It's coming, that great thing, the success you're working for. Then when you wake up one day about 40 years old, you say, my God, I've arrived. I'm there. And you don't feel very different from what you always felt. And there's a slight letdown because you feel there's a hoax. And there was a hoax, a dreadful hoax. They made you miss everything by expectation. Look at the people who live to retire and put those savings away. And then when they're 65, they don't have any energy left, they're more or less impotent, and they go and rot in an old people's senior citizens community. Because we've simply cheated ourselves the whole way down the line. We thought of life by analogy with a journey, with a pilgrimage, which had a serious purpose at the end, and the thing was to get to that end, success or whatever it is, or maybe heaven after you're dead. But we missed the point the whole way along. It was a musical thing, and you were supposed to sing or to dance while the music was being played. So then, obviously, in music, though, one doesn't make the end of a composition the point of the composition. If that was so, the best conductors would be those who played fastest. Obviously, this seminar is especially designed for the people of Palm Springs. And we can consider the pursuit of pleasure. You don't need to beat nature into submission. Why be hostile to nature? Because after all, you are a symptom of nature. You, as a human being, you grow out of this physical universe in just exactly the same way that an apple grows off an apple tree. So let's say the tree which grows apples is a tree which apples, using apple as a verb. And a world in which human beings arrive is a world that peoples. And so the existence of people is symptomatic of the kind of universe we live in. Just as spots on somebody's skin are symptomatic of chickenpox. Just as hair on a head is symptomatic of what's going on in the organism. But we have been brought up by reason of our two great myths, the ceramic and the fully automatic, not to feel that we belong in the world. So our popular speech reflects it. We say, I came into this world. You didn't, you came out of it. We say, face facts. We talk about encounters with reality, as if it was a head-on meeting of completely alien agencies, and the average person has the sensation that he is a somewhat that exists inside a bag of skin, a center of consciousness, which looks out at this thing and what the hell is it going to do to me? You see? I recognize you kind of look like me, and I've seen myself in a mirror, and you look like you might be people. So maybe you're intelligent, maybe you can love too, and maybe perhaps you're all right. Some of you are anyway. If you've got the right color of skin, or you have the right religion, or whatever it is, you're okay. But there are all those people over in Asia and Africa, and they may not really be people. When you want to destroy someone, you always define them as unpeople. Not really human. Monkeys, maybe idiots, maybe machines, maybe, but not people. So, but we have this hostility to the external world because of the superstition, the myth, the absolutely unfounded theory that you yourself exist only inside your skin. Now, I want to propose another idea altogether. You know, there are astronomers. There's two great theories going on in astronomy about the origination of the universe. One is called the explosion theory, and the other is called the steady state theory. The steady state people say there never was a time when the world began. It's always Expanding, yes, but always as a result of free hydrogen in space, with the free hydrogen coagulates and makes new galaxies. But the other people say there was a primordial explosion, an enormous bang millions of years ago, which flung all the galaxies into space. Well, let's take that just for the sake of argument and say that was the way it happened. It's like you took a bottle of ink and you threw it at a wall. Smash, and all that ink spreads. And in the middle, it's dense, isn't it? And as it gets out on the edge, the little droplets are finer and finer and make more complicated patterns. See? So in the same way, there was a big bang in the beginning of things, and it spread. And you and I, sitting here in this room, as complicated human beings, are way, way out on the fringe of that bang. We're the complicated little patterns on the end of it. Very interesting. But so we define ourselves as being only that. If you think that you are only inside your skin, you define yourself as one very complicated little curlicue, way out on the edge of that explosion, way out in space and way out in time. Billions of years ago, you were a big bang. But now you're a complicated human being. And then we cut ourselves off like this, and don't feel that we're still the Big Bang. But you are. Depends how you define yourself. You are actually, if this is the way things started, if there was a Big Bang in the beginning, you're not something that is a result of the Big Bang. You're not something that is a sort of puppet on the end of the process. You are still the process. You are the Big Bang, the original force of the universe coming on as whoever you are. See, when I meet you, I see not just what you define yourself as, Mr. So-and-so, Miss So-and-so, Mrs. So-and-so. I see every one of you as the primordial energy of the universe coming on at me in this particular way. I know I'm that too. But we've learned to define ourselves as separate from it. And so what I would call a kind of a basic problem we've got to go through first is to understand that there are no such things as things. That is to say, separate things or separate events. That is only a way of talking. And if you can understand this, you're going to have no further problems. I once asked a group of high school children, what do you mean by a thing? And first of all, they gave me all sorts of synonyms. They said it's an object, which is simply another word for a thing. It doesn't tell you anything about what you mean by a thing. Finally, a very smart girl from Italy, who was in the group, said a thing is a noun. And she was quite right. A noun isn't a part of nature, it's a part of speech. There are no nouns in the physical world. There are no separate things in the physical world either. See, the physical world is wiggly. It's something like this. Maybe that's a cloud. The clouds, mountains, trees, people are all wiggly. And only when human beings get working at things, they build buildings in straight lines and try and make out that the world isn't really wiggly. But here are we sitting in this room, all built on straight lines, but each one of us is as wiggly as all get out. Now then, when you want to get control of something that wiggles, it's pretty difficult, isn't it? You try and pick up a fish in your hands, and the fish is wiggly and it slips out. What do you do to get hold of the fish? You use a net. And so the net is the basic thing we have for getting hold of the wiggly world. And so if you want to get hold of this wiggle, you've got to put a net over it. see? Now what's going to happen? A net is something regular. And I can number the holes in a net. So many holes up, so many holes across. And if I can number these holes, I can count exactly where each wiggle is in terms of a hole in that net. And that's the beginning of calculus, the art of measuring the world. But in order to do that, I've got to break up the wiggle into bits. And I've got to call this a specific bit, and this the next bit of the wiggle, and this the next bit, and this the next bit of the wiggle. And so these bits are things or events. Bits of wiggles, which I mark out in order to talk about the wiggle, in order to measure it, and therefore in order to control it. But in nature, in fact, in the physical world, the wiggle isn't bitted. Like you don't get a cut-up fryer out of an egg. But you have to cut the chicken up in order to eat it. You bite it. But it doesn't come bitten. So the world doesn't come thinged. It doesn't come evented. You and I are all as much continuous with the physical universe as a wave is continuous with the ocean. The ocean waves, and the universe peoples. And as the wave, I wave at you and say, you. The world is waving at you, at me with you. And saying, hi, I'm here. But we are consciousness, the way we feel and sense our existence, being based on a myth that we are made, that we are parts, that we are things. Our consciousness has been influenced so that each one of us does not feel that. No, you can't bring out your education. So, philosophy in the Western sense means generally an exercise of the intellect, and the manipulation of symbols is very largely, until we come to poetry and music, an exercise of the intellect. But what philosophy has become today in the academic world is something extremely restricted. By and large, in the academic world of both the United States and England, Germany, France to some extent, philosophy is falling into two other disciplines, mathematical logic on the one hand and linguistics on the other. And the departments of philosophy throughout the academic world have bent over backwards to be as scientific as possible. As William Earle, who was professor of philosophy at Northwestern University, said in an essay called Notes on the Death of a Culture, that an academic philosopher today must above all things avoid being edifying. He must never stoop to lying awake at nights, considering problems of the nature of the universe and the destiny of man, because these have largely been dismissed as metaphysical or meaningless questions. So, unworthy of a scientific philosopher who arrives at his office at 9 o'clock in the morning, dressed in a business suit, carrying a briefcase, and does philosophy until 5 in the afternoon, at which point he goes home to cocktails and dinner and dismisses the whole matter from his head. And William Earle adds, he would wear a white coat to work if he could get away with it. This is, of course, a little exaggerated, but this, by and large, is what departmental academic philosophy has become. And Oriental philosophy is simply not philosophy in that sense. So you see, we have something here which I will call not philosophy, except in the most ancient sense of basic curiosity. I prefer to call these disciplines ways of liberation. Ways of liberation from Maya. And the following of them does not depend on believing in anything, in obeying anything, or on doing any specific rituals, although rituals are included for certain purposes. It is a purely experimental approach to life. It is something like a person who, say, has defective eyesight, going to an ophthalmologist to correct his vision. Buddhism is therefore basically a correction of psychic vision. To be disenthralled by the game of Maya. Not incidentally to regard the Maya as something evil, but as a good thing of which one can have too much, and therefore get spiritual and psychic indigestion, from which we all suffer.
Sponsored by Anchor. You know, I didn't really know what to do with podcasts or how to make one until I came across Anchor a couple weeks ago, and they're great with sponsorships, listener support. You can add music, background music, and little spliffs, little sound variations, and everything. Record from your laptop, computer, or cell phone. Their apps are great. I really enjoy Anchor. Is the best choice in podcasts. Right now, as I see, I've actually tried two other podcasts, which we'll name nameless, but Anchor is great. They dump directly into Spotify, if you so choose, and you can share from there onto your other social media. Anchor. Peace out, motherfuckers. Mr. Mission Control's out of here.
There's nothing worse than overhype, so we won't go overboard telling you how Taco Bell's Quesalupa is back with its cheese-stuffed shell. We'll skip the Quesalupa air shows and making a statue in honor of how there's cheese in every bite.
Oh, marvelous.
And we won't send one to the moon.
Quesalupa has landed.
Instead, we'll pass on all the fanfare and just tell you Taco Bell's Quesalupa has returned, and we think you'll like it. At participating locations for a limited time.
You passed.
The position of the Upanishads is that the self is the one and only reality without a second, that all this universe is finally Brahman and appears to be a multiplicity of different things and different events only by reason of Maya, which is illusion, magic, art, creative power. So then, it is basic to the Vedanta that Brahman, this intangible, non-objective ground of everythgrupthing that exists, is identical with the ground of you. And this is put in the formula Tattvam Asi. We should translate that into a modern American idiom as "you're it."
Hinduistic doctrine, which is very difficult for those brought up in the Judeo-Christian traditions to accept, because it is fundamental to Christian and Jewish theology that whatever you are surely not the Lord God. And Christians feel about the Hindu doctrine that we are all fundamentally masks of God, that it's pantheism, and that's a dirty word in Christian theological circles, because of the feeling that if everything is God, then all moral standards are blown to hell, because it means everything is as good as everything else. Everything that happens is really God, and this must include the good things and the bad things. And that seems to them a very dangerous idea. Actually, all religious doctrines contain very, very dangerous ideas. Says Brahman is not at all the same thing as a Jew means by the Lord Adonai, because the Jew and the Christian means the boss, to whom divine honors are due as above all others. The Hindu, on the other hand, does not mean the boss. He doesn't mean the king, the Lord, the political ruler of the universe. He means the inmost energy, which, as it were, dances this whole universe, without, as it were, the idea of authority, of governing some intractable element that resists his or its power. So, if a Christian or a person in a Christian culture announces that he has discovered that he is God, we put him in the loony bin, because it's unfashionable to burn people for heresy anymore. But in India, if you announce that you're the Lord God, they say, well, of course, how nice that you found out. Because everybody is. great problem arises, does it appear that we are not? Why do we think? Why do we have the sensory impression that this whole universe consists of a vast multiplicity of different things, and we don't see it all as one? Well, what would you think it would be like to see it all as one? I know a lot of people who study Oriental philosophy hear about attaining these great states of consciousness, nirvana, moksha, which the Hindus use, liberation, satori, Zen Buddhist word for enlightenment or awakening. What would it be like to have that? How would you feel if you saw everything is really one basic reality? As if all the outlines and differentiations in the field of vision suddenly became vague, melted, and we saw only a kind of luminous sea of light. But rather advisedly, the Vedanta philosophy does not really seriously use the word one of the Supreme Self. Because the word and the idea one has an opposite, many, on one side, and another opposite, none, on the other. And it is fundamental to Vedanta that the Supreme Self is neither one nor many, but, as they say, non-dual. In this word, Advaita. Is a negative word like non. Dvaita is from dva, same as the Latin duo, two. So Advaita is non-dual. And this at first for Westerners is a difficult conception. Because you naturally, as a Western logician would say, but the non-dual is the opposite of the dual. Therefore it has an opposite. True. But the Hindu is using this term in a special sense. How in logic, in human rationality, can I possibly think except in terms of opposites? All rational discourse is talk about classification in four states. Classification of experiences, of sensations, of notions. And the nature of a class is that it's a box. And if a box has an inside, it has to have an outside. While is you is or is you ain't is fundamental to all classification. And we can
It's very important to get rid of that illusion of duality between the thinker and the thought. So find out who is the thinker behind the thoughts, who is the real, genuine you. And so one of the methods that is used is shouting. The Zen master would say to a student, now, I want to hear you. I want to hear you say the word mu and really mean it. Because I want to hear not just the sound, but the person who says it. Now produce for me that. He says, mu! And the Zen teacher says, no, not yet. Mu! And he says, it's only coming from your throat. I want to hear your belly. No? And always, you see, it'll never come while the person is trying to make a differentiation between a true move and a false move. Most of you know the old story about the astronaut who went far out into space and was asked on his return whether he had been to heaven and seen God. And he said yes. And so they said to him, well, what about God? And he said, she is black. And although this is a very well-known and well-worn story, it is very profound. Because, I tell you, I knew a monk who started out in life as pretty much of an agnostic or an atheist, and then he began to read Henri Bergson, the French philosopher who proclaimed the vital force, the élan vital, and so on. And the more he read into this kind of philosophy, the more he saw that these people were really talking about God. And I've read a great deal of theological reasoning about the existence of God, and they all start out on this line. If you are intelligent and reasonable, you cannot be the product of a mechanical and meaningless universe. Figs do not grow on thistles. Grapes do not grow on thorns. And therefore, you, as an expression of the universe, as an aperture through which the universe... That's a purely of the ancient Near East. The universe itself, the energy which underlies it, what it's all about, the ground of being, start out on this line. If you are intelligent and reasonable, you cannot be the product of a mechanical and meaningless universe. Figs do not grow on thistles. Grapes do not grow on thorns. And therefore, you, as an expression of the universe, as an aperture through which the universe is observing itself, cannot be a mere fluke. Because if this world peoples, as a tree brings forth fruit, then the universe itself, the energy which underlies it, what it's all about, the ground of being, as Paul Tillich called it, must be intelligent. Now, when you come to that conclusion, you must be very careful, because you may make an unwarranted jump. Namely, the jump to the conclusion that that intelligence, that marvelous designing power which produces all this, is the biblical God. Be careful. Because that God, contrary to his own commands, is fashioned in the graven image of a paternal, authoritarian, beneficent tyrant of the ancient Near East. And it's very easy to fall into that trap, because it's all prepared, institutionalized in the Roman Catholic Church, in the synagogue, in the Protestant churches, all there ready for you to accept. And by the pressure of social consensus and so on, it is very natural to assume that when somebody uses the word God, it is that father figure which is intended. Because even Jesus used the analogy, the Father, for his experience of God. He had to. There was no other one available to him in his culture. But nowadays, we are in rebellion against the image of the authoritarian father. Especially this should happen in the United States, where it happens that we are a republic and not a monarchy. And if you, as a loyal citizen of this country, think that a republic is the best form of government, you can hardly believe that the universe is a monarchy. But to reject the paternalistic image of God as an idol is not necessarily to be an atheist. Although I have advocated something called atheism in the name of God. That is to say, an experience, a contact, a relationship with God, that is to say, with the ground of your being, that does not have to be embodied or expressed in any specific image. Now, theologians on the whole don't like that idea, because I find in my discourse with them that they want to be a little bit hard-nosed about the nature of God. They want to say that God has indeed a very specific nature. Ethical monotheism means that the governing power of this universe has some extremely definite opinions and rules to which our minds and acts must be conformed. And if you don't watch out, you'll go against the fundamental grain of the universe and be punished in some way. Old-fashionedly, you will burn in the fires of hell forever. More modern-fashionedly, you will fail to be an authentic person. It's another way of talking about it. But there is this feeling, you see, that there is authority behind the world, and it's not you. It's something else. Like we say, that's something else that's far out. And therefore, this Jewish, Christian, and indeed Muslim approach makes a lot of people feel rather strange, estranged from the root and ground of being. There are a lot of people who never grow up and are always in awe of an image of grandfather. Now, I'm a grandfather. I have 5 grandchildren, and so I'm no longer in awe of grandfathers. I know I'm just as stupid as my own grandfathers were, and therefore am not about to bow down to an image of God with a long white beard. Now, naturally, of course, we intelligent people don't believe in that kind of a God, not really. I mean, we think that God is spirit, that God is very undefinable and infinite and all that kind of thing. But nevertheless, the images of God are have a far more powerful effect upon our emotions than our ideas. And when people read the Bible and sing hymns, Ancient of Days, who sittest throned in glory, immortal, invisible, God only wise, in light inaccessible, hid from our eyes. They still got that fellow up there with a beard on. It's way in the back of the emotions. And so we should think, first of all, in contrary imagery. And the contrary imagery is, she's black. Imagine instead of God the Father, God the Mother. And imagine that this is not a luminous being, blazing with light, but an unfathomable darkness, such as is portrayed in Hindu mythology by Kali, K-A-L-I, the Great Mother, who is represented in the most terrible imagery. Kali has a tongue hanging out long.
The last one I put on there, I tried some new stuff, some newer songs, and the feedback I got was a lot of people commenting on there. A lot of folks prefer the old stuff, that's what I like, the old stuff too. But it's still funny, you can make a dirty song out of anything, it'll be funny. But yeah, with country music, I like the old stuff a whole lot better than anything that's new. But I'll do more of the old stuff. Anyway, Grandma don't watch this. I'm going to say that now. I don't want my grandma watching. Kids don't watch it. And on the last video I did, I forgot to say Grandma don't watch that. A lot of people caught that too. But what happened was I did say it, but I got tickled during the video. I got to laughing, and I had to start over again. And on the second take, I forgot to say it on that one. But anyway, I'm going to always say that Grandma don't watch it because I don't want to see you next to it. And kids, your parents watch your kids. Don't let them watch my channel because it ain't good. All right, this here's old Freddie Fender song. Y'all know Before the Next Teardrop Falls? Mine's Before My Next Erection Falls. It goes like this. If you're wanting to make love, but your husband can't get it up, then call me, and I'll come over with these big balls. Your man can wait out in the yard with his wiener that won't get hard, and I'll be there before my next erection falls. Oh, I'll be there anytime you need poked in the ass, when your man ain't good for nothing but drinking beer and passing gas. And for you women with cheating men, if you're wanting to get revenge, call me and I'll be there before my next erection falls. Oh, I'll be there before my next I guess I should have put a Spanish verse in there. I ain't too good at writing in Spanish, though. I guess I could try.
All right. Well, that's about it for the stream today, guys. We'll be going live tonight. Hopefully having Ariel and some other people on the stream. It got pretty wild. Got pretty wild yesterday, I have to say. And I really enjoyed everybody tuning in and participating. Even though I don't know what everybody's doing right now, probably working or whatever. It's 1:51, 1 o'clock. And middle of the day, everybody's working, middle of the work week. So, but I just want to do some Allan Watts stuff today and probably be doing some more Allan Watts later on. But anyway, just it gets you kind of in the meditative state of mind, meditating. So I needed to focus so I could play some Warzone. I was kind of screwing up last night and played for 3 hours, and man, I didn't hardly get anywhere because I was getting killed all the time. I don't know who plays late at night. I guess the Japanese, the Chinese. But anyway, got a little sleep this morning. Now I'm ready to hit again. So, yeah, and hopefully Ariel and Stranger and Silver Sister and maybe Teresa come back on tonight, and we'll have a good old time. Until then, peace out, motherfuckers. Mr.